The morning sun was bright and hot when the sun came up over Dust Valley. The sky was blue and clear, with no clouds at all. It was the kind of morning where the heat makes everything shake and move, even the air itself. By 9 o'clock in the morning, the temperature was already so hot that people had to wipe sweat from their faces every few seconds. Dust Valley Ranch sat in the middle of flat, open land. All around it, you could see nothing but desert and sky for miles and miles. The ranch was famous for one thing every year, the biggest horse auction in 3 states. People came from far away to buy and sell horses. Ranchers came, traders came, rich farmers came. Even some city people came to watch and spend their money. Today was that day. The auction ring was made of strong wooden fences painted brown. Inside the ring, the ground was hard and dusty. Around the ring, there were many benches and chairs where people sat. More people stood on the sides because there was no room to sit. Men wore big hats to keep the sun off their faces. Some wore guns on their sides. Women wore long dresses that went down to their feet, even though it was very hot. Children ran between the benches, excited to see the horses. There were maybe 300 people at the auction that day. At the front of the ring, there was a high wooden stand. This was where the auctioneer stood. His name was Buck Henderson, and he was 60 years old. Buck had been doing this job for 40 years. He knew every kind of horse there was. He could look at a horse for just 5 seconds and know if it was fast, strong, smart, or lazy. His voice was loud and deep, and he could make people want to buy almost anything by the way he talked about it. Buck stood on his stand with his arms on his hips, looking down at the crowd. Next to him was a young boy who helped bring the horses into the ring. The boy's name was Tommy, and he was only 12 years old, but he knew horses better than most grown men. The first horse came into the ring. It was a big, beautiful black horse with a shiny coat. The horse walked strong and proud, like it knew it was beautiful. The crowd clapped their hands and made sounds of respect. Buck smiled and started talking fast. "Here is Lightning Storm, folks. 3 years old, strong and fast. This horse can work all day in the hot sun and not get tired. Look at his legs thick and powerful. Look at his chest big and strong. Who will give me $500 for this beauty?" A man in the front row put his hand up, and the bidding started. Many people wanted Lightning Storm. Finally, a rich rancher from the north won the horse for $1,200. The crowd clapped again, and Tommy led the black horse out of the ring. More horses came. There was a brown horse with white spots. There was a yellow horse with a long mane. There was a gray horse that was very fast. Each horse was strong and beautiful and expensive. The crowd got excited about each one. Men shouted out their bids. Money changed hands. People shook hands to make deals. Buck's voice never stopped. He talked and talked, making everything sound wonderful. But then, after about 2 hours, everything changed. Tommy came back into the ring, but this time he was leading a very small horse. It was a colt, which means a young horse, and he was not like any of the other horses that day. The colt was so small that he looked strange next to the big horses. His legs were very thin, like thin sticks. His body was not round and full like healthy horses. It was flat and thin. His coat was not shiny and pretty. It was dull and dirty looking, even though Tommy had tried to clean him. The colt walked very slow. Each step looked hard, like his legs hurt. His head hung down. His ears did not move much. He did not look proud like the other horses. He looked sad and tired and sick. The crowd went quiet. Buck looked down at the colt. For the first time that day, he did not smile. He did not use his big, happy voice. He looked tired. He looked like he did not want to sell this horse. "Well, folks," Buck said, and his voice was not excited anymore. "Here is a colt, born last winter on Miller's farm. He had some sickness when he was a baby, and, well, He did not grow strong like the others. Look at him. He is weak. His legs are thin. He might not ever be good for work or riding. But we have him here, so let's see what we can do. Who will give me $50 for this little horse? $50. That was very cheap. The beautiful black horse sold for $1,200. This little colt was worth less than 1/25 of that. Nobody raised their hand. Buck waited. He looked at all the faces. Nobody wanted to buy this weak little horse. Come on, folks, Buck said. $50 is nothing. Anyone? $50 for a young colt? Still nothing. Some people looked away. Some people were talking to each other about other things. A man near the front smiled and shook his head like the colt was funny. Another man spat brown tobacco juice into the dust and did not even look at the colt. A boy of about 10 years old pointed at the colt and said to his father, "Look how bad he looks. That horse is going to die." A father laughed and said, "That horse is not worth the food it eats." The colt did not move. He stood very still, his head down, looking at the ground. Maybe he understood what people were saying. Maybe he felt that nobody wanted him. Buck sighed and said, $40? Anyone? Will someone please just buy this colt for $40? For a long time, nothing happened. Buck looked sadder and sadder. Then, from the very back of the crowd, an old hand went up. It was slow and careful, like the person was not sure if he should raise it. The hand belonged to an old man with a gray beard and a weathered face. He was sitting alone on one of the benches in the back. "I will give $60, the old man said. His voice was quiet, but it was strong. Buck looked surprised. He did not look happy. He looked confused about why this old man would want this weak colt. But rules were rules. If someone made an offer, it was done. "Sold," Buck said. $60 for the colt. "Tommy, bring him over." Tommy led the little colt out of the ring, away from the crowd, away from all the people who did not want him, away from all the eyes that looked at him like he was nothing. The colt did not resist. He just followed, his thin legs moving slowly, his head down. Nobody watched him go. Nobody cared. The crowd was already looking at the next horse, a big, strong horse with perfect legs and shiny hair. The weak little colt was forgotten in 5 seconds. But the old man in the back, the one with the quiet voice and the weathered
Samuel
face,
Mackenzie.
he watched
He was 73 years old, but
He
his
watched
body was
until
still
the colt
strong
was out of
from
sight.
working hard his whole life.
And something in the
His
old
face was
man's
brown
eyes
and weathered
said that
from the
he had
sun,
seen something
with
in
deep
that
lines
little
that
horse
told the
that nobody
story
else
of
could
many
see.
years living in the
Something
desert.
important.
His beard was gray and white, and his hands were big and rough from years of work. But his eyes were kind and gentle, the kind of eyes that made people feel safe. Samuel lived alone on a small ranch about 10 miles from Dust Valley. His ranch was not like the big, fancy ranches owned by rich men. It was small and quiet, with just one house, one barn, and some fences around open land. Samuel had lived there for 30 years, ever since his wife died. He lived by himself, and he was happy that way. Samuel was different from the other men at the auction. Most of the men, they were looking for horses to work hard and make money. They wanted big, strong horses that could work all day pulling wagons or carrying heavy things. They wanted horses that could win races and make them famous. They wanted horses that could make them richer. But Samuel was not like that anymore. Samuel had been rich once. When he was younger, he had worked hard and owned a big ranch with many horses. He had been mean about business and wanted everything for himself. But then his wife got very sick, and all the money in the world could not make her better. She died one winter day, and Samuel understood that money was not the most important thing in life. After that, he sold most of his land and lived small and quiet. Now, Samuel spent his days doing simple things. He fixed his fences. He took care of his few animals. He read books. He sat outside and watched the sunset. He helped people in the town when they needed help, but he did not expect anything back. He had found peace in his life. Samuel had come to the auction that day just because he liked to look at horses. He liked to feel their strength and understand their spirits. He did not plan to buy anything, but when he saw the weak little colt, something happened to him. Most people saw a colt that was sick and weak and not worth money. But Samuel saw something different. He saw pain in those eyes. He saw a young life that had suffered already, even though it was so young. He saw a colt that had been rejected and hurt by the world. And Samuel understood that feeling. He remembered being young and struggling. He remembered times when he felt weak and scared. He remembered how much it hurt when people did not believe in him. Samuel's heart moved with feelings of kindness for the little colt. That is why he raised his hand and bought the colt for $60. After the auction ended and the crowd left, Samuel took the colt by the rope and led him to his wagon. The colt walked very slow, and Samuel did not rush him. He tied the colt carefully to the back of the wagon so the colt would not fall or get hurt. Then Samuel drove his wagon home, moving slow and easy so the colt would not have to run or move too fast. The ride took 3 hours. When they arrived at Samuel's ranch, the sun was starting to go down and make the sky orange and pink. Samuel led the colt to the barn and into a clean stall. The stall had fresh hay and clean water. Samuel gave the colt good oats to eat, the kind that were soft and easy to eat. Then Samuel just sat in the corner of the barn and watched the colt eat. The colt ate slow. It took him a long time to finish. But Samuel did not mind waiting. For the next 3 weeks, Samuel did almost nothing but care for the colt. Every morning, before the sun came up, Samuel would walk to the barn. He would clean the colt stall and put down fresh hay. He would brush the colt's coat very gentle, taking care not to hurt him. He would wash the colt with cool water and let it dry in the sun. He would check the colt's legs and hooves to make sure nothing was hurt. He would give the colt fresh water and good food. But more important than all of this, Samuel would talk to the colt. Samuel would sit in the barn in the quiet morning time, and he would talk to the colt about everything. He would tell the colt about the land and the sky. He would tell the colt about the stars and the moon. He would tell the colt about his wife and how much he missed her. He would tell the colt about his life and his mistakes and his hopes. Samuel did not talk loud or fast. He talked slow and quiet, in a voice that sounded like the wind in the trees. The colt would listen. At first, the colt was scared and did not trust Samuel. But every day, the colt became more calm. Every day, the colt would move closer to Samuel. Every day, the colt's eyes became a little brighter. By the 3rd week, when Samuel came to the barn in the morning, the colt would walk over to the fence and wait for Samuel to touch him. Then came a morning everything changed. The sun was just starting to come up. The sky was still dark, but it was getting ready to turn orange and pink and yellow. The air was cool and the desert was quiet. There was no wind. There were no sounds at all except the small sounds of the ranch waking up. Samuel stood at the fence between the barn and the open pasture. The colt was standing next to him. The colt was still small and thin, but something was different about him now. His eyes were clearer. His body was less thin than before. He had stopped moving like he was in pain. Samuel reached out and touched the colt's neck. His hand was gentle and warm. The colt turned his head and looked at Samuel with eyes that seemed to understand everything. And then Samuel whispered words that would change everything about the colt's life. "You got power inside you, little one," Samuel said. His voice was very quiet, barely louder than the wind that was not even blowing. "I can feel it. I can feel it right here in your heart. You look weak on the outside, but you're not weak. You're not weak at all. You just needed someone to believe in you first. You got more heart than any horse I ever seen. More heart than I got. And I'm going to show the world what you're made of. I'm going to teach you how to be brave. I'm going to teach you that you can be strong. And one day, the whole world is going to see what I see right now. One day, everybody's going to know your name." The colt stood very still. His ears moved forward. His eyes opened wider. It looked like he understood every single word. It looked like something inside the colt heard those words and believed them. In that moment, in that quiet morning time with the sun just beginning to light up the sky, something changed inside the little colt. A light came on in his eyes. A hope came into his heart. The weak little colt that nobody wanted at the auction had found the one person in the whole world who believed in him. And that made all the difference. After that morning, when Samuel whispered his special words, everything started to change. The colt's body started to grow stronger. His spirit started to grow brighter, but it did not happen fast. Samuel knew that you cannot build a strong horse by rushing. You have to build strength slow, with patience and love. The first thing Samuel did was let the colt rest. For 1 whole month, Samuel did not try to train the colt or make him work. He just let the colt run free in the pasture and eat good food and sleep in a clean barn. The colt's body needed time to heal from being sick. His muscles needed time to grow. His bones needed time to become strong. Samuel understood this, and he did not rush. Every day, Samuel would sit in the pasture and watch the colt. He would watch how the colt moved. He would watch how the colt ate grass and drank water from the stream. He would watch how the colt rested in the shade during the hot parts of the day. And he would talk to the colt, always talking to him, always reminding him, "You got power inside you, little one." The colt would listen and his ears would move forward, like he understood every word. After 1 month, Samuel started the real training. Samuel's training was not like other people's training. Some ranchers would use ropes and whips to make horses do what they wanted. Some would be mean and hurt the horses to make them obey. But Samuel believed that a horse learns better with kindness and patience. Samuel would walk with the colt every morning, leading him by a rope. They would walk for a short distance, maybe only 1 mile at first. Samuel would walk slow so the colt could keep up without getting tired. As they walked, Samuel would talk to the colt about everything he could see. He would point at birds and tell the colt their names. He would point at rocks and tell the colt stories about how the rocks got there. He would point at the sky and tell the colt about the clouds. The colt learned to trust Samuel completely. After 2 weeks of walking, Samuel taught the colt to trot. Trotting is faster than walking, but slower than running. Samuel would say a soft word, and the colt would trot beside him. They would trot for a little while, then stop and rest. Samuel would give the colt water and kind words. "Good boy. You're doing so good. You're getting strong." The colt's legs got stronger. His chest got bigger. His coat started to shine. After another month, Samuel taught the colt to gallop. Galloping is running fast. But Samuel did not make the colt run too far or too fast too soon. He would let the colt run maybe 200 yards, then stop and rest. He would run 3 times a day, and every day the colt would go a little bit farther and a little bit faster. By the time the colt was 5 months old, he could run faster than Samuel could believe. One day, Samuel decided it was time for something new. He brought a saddle to the pasture. The colt had never seen a saddle before, and at first he was scared. Samuel did not rush him. He let the colt smell the saddle. He let the colt touch it with his nose. He talked to the colt in his gentle voice. "Don't be scared, little one. This is going to help you. This is part of your journey to being strong." For 3 days, Samuel just put the saddle on the colt and took it off again. He did not try to ride. He just let the colt get used to the feeling of wearing the saddle. On the 4th day, Samuel sat in the saddle and did not move. The colt was scared at first, but Samuel talked to him and the colt calmed down. Samuel sat in the saddle for only 5 minutes. Then he got off and gave the colt apples as a reward. Every day, Samuel would sit in the saddle a little bit longer. Every day, the colt would stay calmer and braver. Finally, after 2 weeks, Samuel asked the colt to move with him in the saddle. At first, they just walked. Samuel barely moved in the saddle, and they just walked slow around the pasture. But as days passed, they walked farther. Then they trotted. Then they galloped. And when the colt galloped with Samuel on his back, it was beautiful. The colt flew across the ground like he had wings. His thin, weak legs that nobody wanted at the auction were now strong and fast. His small body that looked sick was now healthy and full of power. His eyes that were sad at the auction were now bright and full of life and fire. Samuel would laugh out loud as they galloped, and the colt seemed to laugh too, in a way that horses do. Samuel would say, "That's right. That's right. You got it. You got the power. The whole world is going to see you." Word started to spread through the town about the old man and his little colt. At first, people did not believe it. They said Samuel was crazy for spending money on a weak horse. They said he was wasting his time. But then some people rode out to Samuel's ranch to see for themselves. They wanted to see if the stories were true. One afternoon, a man named Tom Baker rode out to Samuel's ranch. Tom was the owner of the biggest store in town. He was important and rich and always wanted to know about important things happening. When Tom arrived, Samuel was riding the colt around the pasture. Tom's eyes became big and round. He could not believe what he was seeing. The colt that had been weak and sick and rejected at the auction was now running fast and strong. The colt jumped over a fence that was 4 feet high, higher than most horses could jump. The colt turned sharp turns and did fast stops. The colt was fast, smart, and brave. Tom sat on his horse for an hour, just watching. When Samuel finally stopped and rode over to Tom, Tom said, "Samuel, I have seen many horses in my life, but I have never seen anything like this. This colt should not exist. He should not be strong. He should not be able to jump like that. How did you do this?" Samuel smiled and said, "I did not do anything special, Tom. I just believed in him when nobody else did. I gave him time and kindness and patience. I told him he was strong, and he believed me. That's all it takes sometimes. Just someone who believes." Tom rode back to town, and by the next day, everyone was talking about Samuel and the colt. People came to watch. Neighbors rode out to see. Children came to pet the colt. Everybody wanted to know the story of the weak colt that became strong. Samuel never asked for all this attention, but the colt seemed to like it. The colt seemed to understand that he was no longer the forgotten horse that nobody wanted. He was becoming something special, and Samuel knew it was just the beginning. The Silver Creek Racetrack Championship was the biggest horse race in the whole county. It only happened once a year, and people came from everywhere to watch it. Rich people came. Poor people came. Farmers came. City people came. Everybody came because the Silver Creek race was the most exciting thing that happened all year. The prize money was $2,000. $2,000 was huge money in those days. A regular man who worked hard all day made maybe $10 or $15 a week. $2,000 was enough money to buy a whole ranch or a big house or live for years without working. The prize was so big that the best horse owners in 3 states would bring their fastest horses to race. This year, there was a lot of talk about the race. People said it would be the best race ever. There were 5 horses that were so fast and so strong that nobody could say which one would win. One horse was owned by a rich man from Denver. One horse was owned by a rancher from Texas. One horse had won 5 races already. One horse had never lost a race in his life. These were the best horses around. And then Samuel did something that nobody expected. 1 week before the race, Samuel went to town and signed up the colt to race. Nobody believed it when they heard. People at the store said Samuel was crazy. People at the bar said Samuel was making a joke. People on the street said Samuel had lost his mind. The colt was still so small compared to the other horses. The colt had only been trained for a few months. The colt was going to embarrass himself and embarrass Samuel. But Samuel did not listen to what people said. He knew something they did not know. He knew what was inside that colt's heart. The night before the race, Samuel sat in the barn with the colt for a long time. He did not sleep. He just sat next to the colt and talked to him all night long. "Tomorrow is your day," Samuel said. His voice was quiet and serious. "Tomorrow is when you show the whole world who you really are. Tomorrow is when you tell them that you're not weak. Tomorrow is when you prove that believing in yourself is stronger than anything else. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we're going to go out there together, and we're going to show them what a heart can do." The colt listened and did not move. His eyes seemed to understand everything. Dawn came early on race day. The sky was just starting to turn gray when Samuel got up. He brushed the colt very careful, making sure every part of his coat was clean and shiny. He cleaned the colt's hooves. He brushed the colt's mane and tail so they looked beautiful. He wanted the colt to look as good as he felt inside. Then Samuel put on the racing saddle and the racing gear. This was special equipment made light so the horse could run fast. Everything was ready. They left for Silver Creek Racetrack 1 hour before the race. When Samuel and the colt arrived at the racetrack, there were already hundreds of people there. Maybe 500 people, maybe more. The crowd was big and loud and excited. There were tents and food stands. There were people selling things. There were people making bets and giving money to people to bet on horses. The racetrack itself was a big circle of dirt 1 mile all the way around. There were tall fences around it, so people could watch. There was a starting gate at one end and a finish line at the other end. When people saw Samuel and the colt arrive, they started to laugh. "Look at that little horse," somebody shouted. "That's not a racehorse. That's a baby. That's a pet." "Samuel Mackenzie is crazy," somebody else said. "He's throwing away his money. That horse is going to get hurt," a woman said. "Those other horses are twice as big." But Samuel did not care what people said. He rode the colt over to where the other horses were getting ready. There were 5 other horses, and they were all beautiful and big and strong. They all looked like real racehorses. They all looked like winners. The colt looked small next to them. One of the other horse owners, a big man with a red face, looked at Samuel and laughed very loud. "Old man," the big man said, "you should go home. That horse is going to get trampled out there. That horse is going to get hurt bad." Samuel did not say anything back. He just smiled a little bit. It was time for the race. All the horses went to the starting gate. Samuel rode the colt up to the gate, and the colt did not shy away or get scared. The colt was calm and ready. Samuel could feel the colt's heart beating fast, but it was not scared. It was ready. It was hungry for the race. The other 5 horses were also ready. Their owners were sitting on their backs, holding the reins tight. The crowd was very quiet now, waiting and watching. The starting gun went crack. The gate opened, and all 6 horses jumped forward at the same time. The colt started in the middle. He was not in front, but he was not behind either. The big horses on both sides of him were running hard and fast. The crowd started to shout and yell. People were jumping up and down. The noise was so loud it sounded like thunder. For the first quarter mile, the colt stayed in the middle. Then something changed. Samuel felt it. The colt felt it. It was like all the months of training and believing and hoping came together in that one moment. The colt's legs moved faster. His breathing became strong. His heart became fire. The colt started to run faster than all the other horses. He passed the horse on his left. The crowd shouted even louder. He passed the horse on his right. People could not believe what they were seeing. This small horse that everybody laughed at was running faster than horses twice his size. Samuel bent down low on the colt's neck and whispered the same words he had whispered so many times before. "You got power inside you, little one." And the colt heard those words, and the colt believed those words, and the colt ran. The colt flew past the horse that had won 5 races. The colt flew past the horse that had never lost a race. The colt was running so fast that it looked like his hooves did not even touch the ground. It looked like he was flying. The finish line came closer and closer. The colt was in first place, but the big horse from Denver was catching up. That horse was running hard and fast, trying to pass the colt. The crowd was screaming so loud that you could not hear yourself think. 100 yards from the finish line. 50 yards from the finish line. The colt's little legs were flying. The colt's heart was huge. The colt was running like his whole life had been leading to this one moment. Because it had. 20 yards from the finish line. 10 yards from the finish line. The colt crossed the finish line first. The crowd went wild. People were jumping up and down and screaming and yelling. Some people were crying. Some people were laughing. Some people could not believe what they had just seen. Samuel rode the colt slowly to the winner's circle. There were tears on Samuel's face, tears of happiness and pride and love. The colt was breathing hard, but his eyes were bright and alive and proud. The announcer called out, "Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the Silver Creek Racetrack Championship with a new track record is Samuel Mackenzie's horse. A horse that nobody believed in. A horse that everybody laughed at. A horse that nobody wanted." People who had laughed at the colt before were now quiet. They understood something now. They understood that size does not matter. They understood that what people think does not matter. They understood that what matters is what is inside your heart. They understood that one person's belief can change everything. And they understood that the weak little colt from the auction was the strongest horse they had ever seen. After the race, everything changed for Samuel and the colt. Samuel never raced the colt again. He did not need to. The colt had already proven everything that needed to be proven. The colt had already shown the whole world that size does not matter, and that belief is stronger than anything else. Samuel understood that sometimes you win something so big that you do not need to win again. Sometimes one victory is enough to change your whole life. Instead, Samuel decided to use the prize money in a different way. He used some of the money to build a bigger, nicer barn on his ranch. He used some to buy hay and oats to feed not just his colt, but all the animals on his ranch. He gave some money to poor families in town who needed help, and he used the rest to start something special. Samuel turned his ranch into a place where people could come to learn about horses and about life. He called it the Believing Heart Ranch. People started to come from all over. They came to see the famous colt that had won the race. But more importantly, they came to learn the lesson that Samuel wanted to teach. Samuel would let people ride the colt, and while they rode, he would tell them the whole story. He would tell them about the auction where the colt was rejected. He would tell them about how he believed in the colt when nobody else did. He would tell them about the training and the patience and the love. And then Samuel would say the same words he had said so many times before. You got power inside you. Already got power inside you. Sometimes people don't see it. Sometimes you don't see it in yourself, but it's there. And when you find one person who believes in you, everything changes. Children came to the ranch and learned to ride the colt. The colt was gentle with them, like he remembered being small and weak and scared. He remembered what it felt like when nobody believed in you. So he was kind and patient with every person who rode on his back. Young people came to the ranch and learned about responsibility and care. They learned that taking care of something, a horse, a person, a dream, takes time and patience and love. They learned that there are no shortcuts to building something great. Sad people came to the ranch and felt hope. They came because their lives had been hard. They came because people had told them they could not do things. They came because they felt weak and worthless. But when they sat on the colt and felt how strong he was, something changed inside them. They understood that they too had power inside them. They too could be strong. Years passed. The colt was not young anymore. He was an old horse now. His coat was still shiny, but his legs moved slower. His hair started to turn gray, just like Samuel's beard was all gray now. Samuel was 81 years old, and he was starting to slow down too. But Samuel still came to the barn every single day. He would walk slower now, and it took him longer to do his work. But he was always there, talking to the colt, touching the colt, telling the colt how much he loved him. Every morning and every evening, Samuel and the colt would stand together and watch the sun. The sun would come up in the morning, and the sun would go down in the evening, and they would watch it together like they had done for so many years. The whole town loved Samuel and the colt. When Samuel walked down the street, people would stop and say hello. They would tell him how the colt had changed their lives. They would tell him about how they had come to the ranch feeling sad and left feeling hopeful. They would tell him about how they had learned to believe in themselves. Some people had become doctors and lawyers and teachers because they learned at the ranch that they had power inside them. The colt had become more than just a horse. He had become a teacher. He had become a symbol of what is possible when someone believes in you. Then, one cold winter day, Samuel got very sick. He went to bed and did not get better. The doctor came and said Samuel's body was too old and too tired to keep working. Samuel knew he was going to die. He was not scared. He had lived a good life. He had loved and been loved. He had made a difference in the world. He was ready. But before Samuel died, he asked one thing. He asked for the colt to be brought to his bedroom. People carried the colt into the house. Samuel's colt was old now and could not walk so far, and they put the colt next to Samuel's bed. Samuel reached out with a shaking hand and touched the colt's neck one last time. "Thank you," Samuel said, his voice very quiet. "Thank you for believing in me like I believed in you. Thank you for showing people what is possible. Thank you for being my friend. You did it, little one. You did everything I knew you could do." The colt put his head down and touched Samuel's face with his nose. And then Samuel closed his eyes and died. The whole town came to Samuel's funeral. There were 300 people there, maybe more. The colt was led by his bridle, walking behind Samuel's coffin. People cried. They cried for Samuel, but they also cried for themselves, because they understood how much Samuel had taught them. They understood that he had changed their lives by believing in a weak little colt when nobody else did. The colt lived for many more years after Samuel died. People took care of him like Samuel would have wanted. The colt lived to be 30 years old, which is very old for a horse. He spent his last years in a comfortable pasture, eating good food and being loved by everyone who had come to know him. When the colt finally died, the whole town held a ceremony for him. They buried him at the ranch, and they put a big stone over his grave. On the stone, they wrote words that told the story. Here lies a horse who was weak, but became strong. Here lies a horse who was rejected, but became loved. Here lies a horse who taught the world that believing in someone can change everything. And that Colt's story spread and spread. People told it to their children. Children told it to their children. Books were written about Samuel and the colt. People from far away came to visit the ranch where it all happened. The weak little colt that nobody wanted at the auction had become the most famous horse in the whole state. More important than that, he had changed how people thought. He had changed how people treated each other. He had shown people that every life has value. He had shown people that believing in someone is the most powerful thing you can do. Samuel was right when he whispered those words on that early morning so long ago. You got power inside you, little one. Because the colt did have power inside him. And that power was not in his legs or his size or his strength. That power was in his heart. That power was in his ability to keep trying even when everyone said he could not. That power was in his ability to become great because one old man believed in him. And that power changed everything.